The clock is ticking. Are you spending time or wasting it? Written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. Imagine holding an hourglass in your hands, its smooth, curved surface glinting in the light. Inside, golden grains of sand flow steadily, each one marking a moment of time passing irrevocably. As you watch, you feel the pull of a profound question. What am I doing with the grains I've been given? Life is much like this hourglass, beautiful, fleeting, and relentless. Every grain represents a decision, a memory, an opportunity. Some are invested in pursuits that build something lasting, while others slip away unnoticed, scattered by the winds of distraction or regret. The truth is, we all hold the same hourglass. What sets us apart is how we choose to spend our time. This book is not about how to stop the sands from falling, or how to turn the hourglass upside down in search of more time. It's about something far greater, how to live fully within the rhythm of the falling grains. It's about transforming each fleeting moment into something meaningful, shaping a life that tells a story worth remembering. This book will take you on a journey to explore how time shapes your choices, relationships, and legacy. You'll meet castle builders who use their grains to create lasting structures of purpose and meaning. You'll walk alongside wind chasers, whose time is scattered aimlessly, and learn from their lessons. You'll encounter mirrors and pendulums, reminders of how time reflects who you are and aligns with your unique rhythm. But this journey is not just about reflection, it's about action. Each chapter offers practical steps to help you reclaim lost grains, align with your purpose, and leave behind a legacy that endures. So, as the clock continues to tick and the sands continue to fall, ask yourself, what will you create with the time you have? This book will guide you to answer that question and to make every grain of sand count. Chapter 1. The Hourglass Revealed. Imagine stepping into a grand hall where an immense hourglass dominates the space. Its golden sands shimmer as they cascade from the top chamber to the bottom, a mesmerizing yet relentless flow. This hourglass represents your life, not as a looming countdown to an end, but as a measure of opportunity. Each grain symbolizes a moment, fleeting yet potent, a chance to shape your world. But here's the paradox: most people walk past their personal hourglass daily without a second glance. Instead of marveling at the potential held in every grain, they are caught in a fog of routine and distractions. They chase after tasks that fill their schedules but not their souls. The question is, how often do we really notice the sands slipping away? To understand the significance of time, we must embrace the metaphor. The hourglass is not just a timer but a teacher. Its narrow neck is a constant reminder that time flows in one direction. It cannot be reversed or paused. The grains at the bottom are memories, the top is potential, and the neck is where life happens. As you stand before this hourglass, imagine each grain as a choice. Do you spend it wisely, or let it slip into oblivion? Consider Emily, a young artist who spent years doubting her talent. For her, the hourglass seemed a cruel reminder of time wasted. Yet, one day she decided to stop dwelling on the grains already fallen and focus on those still in the top chamber. By doing so, she transformed her life, creating works that not only brought her joy but inspired others. Her story begs the question: how do we view the time slipping through our fingers, an ally or an adversary? This chapter challenges you to reframe your perspective. The hourglass is not your enemy, it is your guide. Instead of fearing the sands of time, what if you used each grain as a tool for creation, growth, or connection? Think about the trigger moments in your life, those times when the passage of time felt undeniably real. Perhaps it was the birth of a child, the loss of a loved one, or a missed opportunity. These moments remind us of the hourglass, shaking us awake to the reality that time is finite. But they also offer a choice to live more intentionally or to retreat into regret. One might wonder, what does it take to truly notice the grains as they fall? It requires mindfulness, a deliberate act of being present. When you pour your attention into the present, you elevate each grain of sand, giving it purpose and meaning. Here's the first step. Imagine your hourglass every morning as you wake. Visualize the sands waiting to flow, and ask yourself, what will I do with today's grains? Will you nurture relationships, invest in your passions, or simply be? By the end of this chapter, let this metaphor imprint itself on your mind. The clock is ticking, but it is not a warning, it's an invitation. Will you step into the rhythm of the hourglass, or will you let its sands slip unnoticed? Chapter 2. Grains of gold or dust? Picture yourself standing in a vast desert. Every grain of sand beneath your feet feels insignificant, until you realize that each grain holds the power to build a castle, forge a path, or be swept away by the wind. The grains in this desert represent your time. The question is, are they grains of gold, or merely dust slipping through your fingers? To answer, let's consider two travelers. The first, Maria, carries a small pouch of golden grains. Each one symbolizes a moment she invested wisely, hours spent learning a new skill, comforting a friend, or pursuing her passion. As she travels, she sprinkles these grains, leaving behind a shimmering path of purpose and impact. The second traveler, Derek, lets his grains scatter without thought. They are consumed by the winds of distraction, mindless scrolling, half-hearted efforts, and opportunities lost to hesitation. His path, unlike Maria's, is invisible, swept clean by the relentless breeze. Now, ask yourself, which traveler are you? This metaphor reveals a profound truth: time is inherently neutral. It is neither gold nor dust until you assign it value. A single hour can create something extraordinary, or it can dissolve into nothingness. The choice lies in your actions. Take Amanda, for example, a single mother balancing a demanding job and her children's needs. For years she felt like Derek, letting her time slip away under the weight of responsibilities. But one evening, as she watched her daughter struggle with homework, Amanda realized she could turn those ordinary moments into gold. Instead of seeing her time as a burden, she began treating it as an investment. Together, they started reading, learning, and growing, transforming their relationship and Amanda's perspective. This shift begs a crucial question: how do you assign value to your time? The key lies in identifying what truly matters to you. If your time is spent on activities aligned with your values and aspirations, each grain becomes golden. However, when it is consumed by distractions or tasks that hold no meaning, it fades into dust. But here's the catch: recognizing gold versus dust is not always easy. Our modern world is a relentless storm of noise, pulling our attention in countless directions. It takes discipline to pause and evaluate, to ask, is this moment enriching my life, or am I letting it slip away? Consider the practical metaphor of a sieve. Imagine pouring your time through a sieve designed to catch golden grains while letting the dust fall through. This sieve represents your priorities, values, and goals. Without it, everything mixes together, and you lose sight of what truly matters. Let's bring this metaphor into your daily life. Start by listing your top 3 priorities: your family, personal growth, or perhaps a dream project. Then, as you plan your day, ask, does this task align with my golden grains, or is it just dust? This practice transforms the way you view time. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by its passage, you become an alchemist, turning ordinary moments into treasures. Before this chapter ends, let's address the lingering question: how can we ensure we're creating grains of gold? The answer lies in awareness and intention. Pay attention to your choices. Small moments, when treated with care, accumulate into extraordinary legacies. In the end, your desert of time will not be remembered by the quantity of sand, but by the quality of the grains you've left behind. Will you leave a shimmering path for others to follow, or let your time disappear like dust in the wind? Chapter 3. The Castle Builders and the Wind Chasers. In a world of infinite sands, there are two kinds of people: the castle builders and the wind chasers. The castle builders are deliberate, laying their grains of time with purpose, each decision stacking upon the last to create something enduring. The wind chasers, on the other hand, scatter their grains to the whims of the breeze, never grounding their efforts in anything lasting. Picture a vast beach where people work tirelessly. Some are sculpting magnificent sandcastles, designing every tower and archway with care. Others, mesmerized by the wind, sprint after gusts of sand swirling in unpredictable patterns. The wind chasers seem busy, their movements frantic, but when the wind dies down, they stand empty-handed. Ask yourself, am I building castles or chasing the wind? To answer this question, let's meet two individuals: Jonah and Clara. Jonah is the quintessential wind chaser. His life is filled with activity, constant meetings, endless notifications, and the lure of the next big distraction. Yet, despite his busyness, he often feels hollow at the end of the day. His efforts leave no lasting impact, like chasing shadows in the sand. Clara, by contrast, is a castle builder. Her days are no less busy, but her focus is intentional. Each hour is a building block she carefully places toward her life's vision: a thriving business, a nurturing family, and a vibrant community. While the wind occasionally scatters her efforts, her foundation remains intact, and her castle grows steadily. So, what separates the castle builders from the wind chasers? It's not talent or opportunity, it's clarity. Castle builders understand their purpose. They know why they're building and what their end goal is. Wind chasers, by contrast, are often driven by external forces, expectations, trends, or the fear of missing out. But here's the crucial question. How can you shift from chasing the wind to building castles? The answer begins with a blueprint. Every castle starts with a plan, and so should your life. This blueprint doesn't need to be perfect, but it must reflect your values and priorities. Start by asking yourself, what legacy do I want to create? What do I want to stand as a testament to my time? Once you have a vision, the next step is to focus on the grains of sand that matter most. Clara often reminds herself of a simple truth: not all sand is equal. Some moments carry immense weight, time spent nurturing relationships, developing skills, or pursuing passions. Other grains, like mindless distractions or obligations born of guilt, add little to her castle's foundation. Consider the metaphor of the builder's tools. A skilled craftsman doesn't use every tool in the shed for every task. Likewise, you don't need to say yes to every opportunity. The tools and the moments you choose must align with your blueprint. Here's an exercise. Reflect on a recent week of your life. Identify moments where you were building castles, investing in meaningful work or relationships. Contrast them with times when you were chasing the wind, busy but unfulfilled. How did each feel? What did each contribute to your life's vision? As you ponder this, remember that even castle builders face the temptation of the wind. Clara herself admits to days when distractions tug at her attention, threatening to derail her progress. But the difference is that she returns to her blueprint, recalibrates, and continues building. So what about you? What's your castle? And what winds are you chasing that pull you away from it? By the end of this chapter, let this thought settle: the choice to build or chase lies within every grain of sand. You may not control the wind, but you control your hands. Each moment offers the chance to create something meaningful, or to let it slip away. When the sands of your life have all settled, will you look back and see the shadow of fleeting winds, or the towers of a castle that stands against time? Chapter 4. The Narrow Passage. Imagine watching your hourglass from above. As the grains of sand flow steadily, they pass through a narrow neck, one at a time. This narrow passage is life's greatest design. It teaches us that while time is abundant, our focus is not. It demands that we prioritize, making deliberate choices about what flows through. Now, picture yourself holding a jar of marbles, each one representing a task, goal, or obligation. The jar is full, but you're given a challenge. You can only push one marble through a funnel at a time. Suddenly, the question shifts from how much can I do to what deserves to pass through first. This narrow passage represents the limitations we all face. No matter how much you want to achieve, you can only act on one thing at a time. The question is, are you choosing the right things, or are you letting life choose for you? Consider Liam, a young entrepreneur drowning in possibilities. Every day he tackles dozens of tasks, convinced that working harder will bring success. Yet, despite his effort, he feels stagnant. His time slips through the hourglass, unfiltered and unfocused, as he tries to force too many marbles through the funnel at once. Contrast this with Maya, a seasoned teacher who understands the beauty of limits. She doesn't resent the narrow passage, she embraces it. Each morning, she chooses her marbles with care, asking herself, what matters most today? By focusing her energy, she achieves more with less effort. Their stories lead to a powerful realization. Constraints are not a burden, they are a gift. They force us to clarify our priorities and eliminate the noise. Without the narrow passage, life becomes chaotic, a free-flowing torrent of unfiltered grains, leaving us overwhelmed and unfulfilled. But how do we decide what to let through? This is where the principle of essentialism comes into play. Essentialism is the discipline of discerning what is truly important and eliminating the rest. It's about acknowledging that not everything can matter equally. The narrow passage forces this discipline upon us, but the power lies in making these choices intentionally rather than by default. Here's a practical exercise. Each morning, write down 3 priorities for the day. Then, imagine these priorities as marbles you place at the top of your funnel. Commit to letting these priorities flow through, resisting the urge to add more, until they're complete. This practice transforms your focus, turning the narrow passage from a source of frustration into a tool for clarity. The chapter's central question remains: what happens when we resist the narrow passage? The answer is clear: chaos. Liam's story shows us that when we try to force too much through, nothing of value emerges. Tasks are rushed, relationships are neglected, and the grains of time slip away unnoticed. On the other hand, when we embrace the narrow passage, we unlock a profound truth. Less is more. By focusing on fewer priorities, we give them the attention and energy they deserve. Maya's success is not a result of doing everything, it's the result of doing the right things. This idea of focus leads us to the ultimate metaphor, the keyhole. A keyhole, like the neck of the hourglass, is a narrow space that only allows the correct key to pass through. When you align your time and energy with your true priorities, you unlock doors that remain closed to those who scatter their attention. As we close this chapter, let the narrow passage inspire a new perspective on your time. Instead of resenting your limitations, celebrate them. They are life's way of ensuring that what truly matters is given space to flow. The choice is yours. Will you embrace the narrow passage and let it refine your focus, or will you fight it and let your time disperse like unfiltered sand? Chapter 5. Reclaiming Lost Grains. Close your eyes and imagine a windstorm sweeping across a vast desert. As the gusts die down, you look around and see dunes reshaped, grains scattered far and wide. You wonder, where have all the grains gone? This desert is your life, and the lost grains represent the moments you regret, the ones you feel have slipped away forever. Regret is a powerful force. It whispers, you should have done more, chosen better, been wiser. But here's the truth that the desert reveals: while you can't retrieve the grains that have fallen, you can reshape the dunes. Regret can either bury you beneath its weight, or teach you how to reclaim lost time by transforming the way you live moving forward. This transformation begins with perspective. Let's meet 2 wanderers in this desert. The first, Adam, is paralyzed by his losses. He spends hours replaying past mistakes, unable to move forward. The sands beneath him feel heavy, as if they're pulling him into the earth. The second, Elena, walks with purpose. While she also carries regret, she uses it as a guide. Each grain she encounters reminds her of a lesson learned, a chance to grow. She doesn't focus on the grains she's lost but on how to use the grains she still has to shape a future she's proud of. Which wanderer are you? This chapter asks a fundamental question. Can we truly reclaim lost time? While the answer isn't simple, it's transformative. You can't physically retrieve moments that have passed, but you can repurpose their lessons to enrich the moments ahead. Consider the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, creating something more beautiful than the original. Your lost grains are like those fractures. When you mend them with the gold of reflection, growth, and intentionality, you create a life that tells a story of resilience rather than defeat. Here's how you can begin this process. 1. Acknowledge the lost grains. Write down the moments or choices you regret most. Be honest, but don't dwell on blame. This exercise is about clarity, not punishment. 2. Extract the lessons. Next to each regret, write down what it taught you. What wisdom did it give you? What would you do differently now? 3. Create a vision for the future. Use those lessons to outline a vision for the grains still in your hourglass. How will you shape them to ensure they reflect your values and aspirations? Let's return to Elena. One of her greatest regrets was neglecting her family during her early career. For years she let that guilt weigh her down, feeling as though she could never make amends. But one day she realized she still had time to shape the future. She began carving out dedicated time for her loved ones, creating traditions and memories that deepened their bond. By doing so, she transformed her regret into a driving force for change. This story brings us back to you. What regrets have shaped your dunes? And how can you use them to guide your journey forward? Regret, when left unchecked, can act as quicksand, pulling you deeper into the past. But when embraced with intention, it becomes a compass. It shows you where you've been and points you toward where you need to go. The chapter's central metaphor, the reshaping of dunes, reminds us that life is ever changing. While you can't rewrite the past, you can rewrite its meaning. A lost grain can become a cornerstone for growth, a building block for something extraordinary. As we conclude this chapter, let's settle on this though: the clock may tick forward, and the sands may fall, but every moment holds the potential for redemption. The lost grains are not truly gone, they are part of the foundation you build upon. Will you let regret bury you in the desert of lost time, or will you use its lessons to shape a landscape worth admiring? Chapter 6. The Rhythm of Purpose. Imagine a pendulum swinging back and forth, steady and unyielding. Its rhythm mirrors the ticking clock of your life, constant, deliberate, and inescapable. Now imagine trying to fight that rhythm, pushing against it or ignoring its tempo entirely. But when you align with it, you find harmony, a flow where each swing moves you closer to your goals. This pendulum represents your purpose, and the rhythm of purpose is the cadence of a life well lived. The question is, are you in sync with your rhythm, or are you fighting against it? Let's consider two dancers in life's ballroom. The first, Olivia, is out of step with her rhythm. She spends her days chasing obligations that don't align with her values. Her movements feel frantic and disjointed, like a dancer tripping over her own feet. She's exhausted, yet she feels she's going nowhere. The second dancer, Samuel, moves with intention. He's not faster or more skilled than Olivia, but his steps flow naturally because they're guided by his purpose. Each decision, each action, is in tune with the rhythm of what truly matters to him. What separates these two dancers? It's not talent or opportunity but alignment. Samuel has taken the time to understand his purpose, the melody of his life, and lets it guide his rhythm. Olivia, by contrast, is trying to dance to everyone else's music, losing sight of her own. This brings us to the heart of the chapter. How do you find and align with the rhythm of your purpose? The first step is to listen. Like any rhythm, purpose starts with awareness. Ask yourself, what are the moments when I feel most alive, most connected to something greater than myself? These moments, however fleeting, offer clues to your purpose. Take Julian, for example. He spent years working in finance, climbing the corporate ladder because he thought that's what success looked like. But every time he volunteered at his local community center, he felt a spark, a sense of meaning he couldn't ignore. When he finally decided to leave his high-paying job to start a nonprofit, he worried he was making a mistake. Yet, as he began working in alignment with his purpose, his life found a rhythm that felt natural and fulfilling. Julian's story raises another question. What sacrifices are you willing to make to align with your purpose? Often, finding your rhythm requires letting go of what doesn't serve you. This might mean releasing old habits, stepping away from societal expectations, or even disappointing others to stay true to yourself. To align with your rhythm, try this exercise. 1. Reflect on your values. Write down your top 5 values. These are the pillars of your purpose. 2. Identify misalignment. Look at your current commitments and activities. Do they align with your values, or are you dancing to someone else's tune? 3. Adjust your tempo. Begin making small changes to bring your daily actions in line with your values. Here's the beauty of purpose. It doesn't require grand gestures or life-altering changes. Like the pendulum, it thrives on consistency. Small, deliberate steps taken every day can align your rhythm with your purpose, creating a life that feels both meaningful and manageable. The chapter's central metaphor, the pendulum, reminds us that purpose isn't static, it's a dynamic rhythm that evolves with time. You don't have to find your purpose all at once. Instead, focus on tuning into its beat and adjusting your steps as you go. Before this chapter closes, consider this: the clock is ticking, and the pendulum is swinging. You can't stop time, but you can choose to dance with it. Will you fight against the rhythm, exhausting yourself in the process, or will you find your purpose and move in harmony with its flow? Chapter 7. The Clock and the Mirror. Imagine standing in front of a grand clock, its hands ticking steadily forward, each movement marking the passage of time. Beside it hangs a mirror, reflecting your image as you stand still. The clock is time, moving forward without pause. The mirror is you, a reflection of how you've spent that time. This juxtaposition reveals a powerful truth: time is not just a measurement of life, it's also a reflection of who you are and how you've lived. The question is, when you look in the mirror, do you see someone who has spent time meaningfully or someone who has let it slip by? Consider the story of Marcus, a man who spent decades climbing the corporate ladder. By all outward measures, he was successful. But one day, as he stared into the mirror, he realized he didn't recognize the person looking back. The reflection showed a stranger, someone who had traded passion for ambition, relationships for deadlines, and purpose for productivity. This moment sparked a question that haunted him. What is my reflection saying about my life? In contrast, there's Naomi, a small-town baker who wakes up before sunrise each day to craft bread for her community. Her reflection shows a woman at peace, not because her life is without challenges, but because she knows her time aligns with her values. Each loaf she bakes feels like a gift, a piece of her soul offered to the world. These stories highlight a crucial insight: the mirror doesn't lie. It reflects the choices you've made and how those choices align, or don't, with your true self. This chapter asks, how can we ensure the clock and the mirror tell the same story? The first step is honest reflection. Like Marcus, you need to ask yourself, does my current life reflect the person I want to be? This question isn't meant to induce guilt but to inspire clarity. Here's a practical exercise. 1. The reflection audit. Spend 10 minutes looking at yourself in a mirror. Ask these questions. What does this reflection say about how I spend my time? Am I proud of the person I see? What changes would I need to make to align my actions with my values? 2. The clock check. Identify 3 areas where you spend the most time each week. Then, compare these with your core values. Are they in alignment? If not, consider what small adjustments you could make to bring them closer. The second step is to embrace intentionality. Time, like the clock, moves forward no matter what. You can't control its pace, but you can control how you fill it. Naomi's peace comes from her intentional use of time, ensuring that her daily actions reflect her values. But what if your reflection shows regret or disconnection, like Marcus's? Here's where the mirror becomes a tool for growth. The beauty of reflection is that it's not static. Just as you can adjust your appearance in a mirror, you can adjust your life to create a reflection that aligns with your purpose. This brings us to the final question of the chapter. What story will your reflection tell when time finally runs out? The answer depends on the choices you make now. Will your story be one of regret or one of fulfillment? The clock and the mirror remind us that time is both external and internal. It's not just about how much time you have, but how that time shapes who you are. The reflection you leave behind, both in the mirror and in the memories of those you touch, will define your legacy. As we close this chapter, let the mirror become a daily practice, a moment to pause and ask, am I becoming the person I want to be? And let the ticking clock remind you that every moment is a chance to realign your reflection with your purpose. Chapter 8. Building a legacy worth watching. Imagine a theater filled with seats, row after row of faces watching a stage. On that stage, your life is playing out, a story told grain by grain, moment by moment. The audience includes your loved ones, your community, and even future generations. They are watching not for perfection, but for purpose. The question is, when the curtain falls, what story will your life tell? Legacy is the culmination of how you've spent your time. It's not about wealth or fame, it's about the impact you leave behind. Each grain of sand in your hourglass contributes to this story, and while you can't rewrite the past, you can shape the ending. Let's meet 2 storytellers. The first, David, lived a life of unchecked ambition. He pursued accolades and achievements, yet as his hourglass neared its end, he realized his story lacked depth. His relationships were fractured, his contributions hollow, and his regrets overwhelming. The second storyteller, Lydia, lived with intention. While her achievements were modest, her story was rich with meaning. She spent her time building connections, nurturing others, and leaving behind lessons that would ripple through generations. These contrasting tales lead us to the ultimate question: what makes a legacy worth watching? The answer lies in 3 principles: authenticity, contribution, and connection. 1. Authenticity. A legacy begins with living a life true to yourself. Lydia's story resonates because it reflects her values. She didn't chase someone else's definition of success, she defined her own. To build a legacy worth watching, start by asking, am I living authentically, or am I playing a role for someone else's approval? 2. Contribution. A meaningful legacy is not built in isolation, it's about what you give to others. David's regrets stemmed from chasing personal success without considering its broader impact. Lydia's fulfillment, by contrast, came from her contributions, acts of kindness, shared wisdom, and a willingness to uplift others. Ask yourself, what am I giving to the world that will outlast me? 3. Connection. Relationships are the threads that weave a lasting legacy. Lydia's story endures not because of grand achievements, but because of the love and connection she fostered. To strengthen your own legacy, consider: am I prioritizing relationships that matter, or am I letting them slip away? These principles guide the final act of your story, but they also demand action. Building a legacy is not passive, it's a deliberate process of choosing what matters most. Here's a practical exercise. 1. Write your eulogy. Imagine your life is over, and someone is delivering your eulogy. What do you want them to say about you? How did you spend your time? Whose lives did you touch? 2. Identify your pillars. From your eulogy, extract 3 key themes, values, contributions, or relationships that you want to define your legacy. 3. Take daily steps. Begin aligning your actions with these pillars. Each small decision adds a grain of sand to the story you're building. The beauty of legacy is that it's not measured in perfection but in progress. Even David, with his regrets, found redemption by shifting his focus in his later years. He began mending relationships, mentoring younger professionals, and investing his time in causes he believed in. As we conclude this book, let's revisit the metaphor of the theater. When the curtain falls, your story will be complete, but its impact will echo in the lives of those who watched. Your legacy is not just what you leave behind, it's the ongoing ripple of your choices, actions, and values. So ask yourself, what story am I writing with my time? And how can I ensure it's one worth watching? The clock is ticking, and the sands are falling, but with every grain, you have the power to shape a legacy that inspires, uplifts, and endures. Take care, and be well.